has the effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for mini Ice Age conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine, creator of the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 video series. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon on this beautiful blue planet. Ransom Godwin, 420 TV Freedomist Films, joining me tonight. And I'm David Dubine from Adapt 2030. Have you noticed the extraordinary amount of flood stories hitting the media? And when I say flood stories, I mean biblical, all-encompassing, unbelievable, can't even fathom once in 1,000-year floods occurring everywhere on the planet. Or the absurd cold. It's just so funny down in, Thredbo in Australia. They were going to set the all-time coldest temperature ever recorded at this time of the year ever in Australian history. Magically, that station went offline. Can you even imagine that? As Australia pummeled with some of the coldest temperatures ever recorded. And we saw the same thing happening across South America, more crops lost. And as we go through, it is about the intensification of the magnetic field forming in the outer solar system. Now, thank you for everybody joining me and Ransom over these last few months, or however long you've been listening to us. Appreciate you spending your so valuable time to listen to what we have to discuss. You know, ideas of how to prepare your families, ideas of, signs in the skies, things that are coming, things are manifesting that you could look for if you want to check some boxes that indeed this grand solar minimum is the cause of every single thing we're seeing on the planet, from the Great Reset to cryptocurrency to rising food prices, inflation, population migration, and everything else in between. But I'm going to put it out on a silver platter right here for you. Jupiter is going to swing past the Earth, and it looks like August 20th will be the day for this. As soon as Jupiter swings past the Earth, August 20th or so, the magnetic field in the outer solar system will have its grip on this planet for the next 4 years. And in earnest, we're in a second magnetic field. Although it'll be at a slight one, it's going to be intensifying every single day. And the anomalies we're seeing right now with jumbled jet streams, double X flares off the backside of the sun, Mars with auroras glowing out of the crust, which gives credence to people seeing the ley lines on our planet, because up on Mars just last week, if you hadn't seen that story, the mineral composition of Mars started to glow with auroras connecting up to its weak connection to the sun, if you want to even call that a magnetosphere. But the lines out that then connected with the sun electrified the crust of Mars to the point it glowed in the minerals on the surface of the planet. Significant changes are inbound. If that's happening on Mars, what's happening on our planet? So you're starting to see it with the floods, seeing it with the crop losses. So the next question would be, is how are governments going to distract us during this time? I'm going to say us because I'm with it too. I'm with you here. So for tonight, Ransom, I'm so glad you're joining me. You sent me that, single atom thick magnet, and gee, where have I seen that before? Magnetized things happening all over the place. But I'm super glad we have a chance to get down and sit together tonight. You had a transformer blowout. We had a cable rip here. It's pretty interesting how all of these internet things are happening across the planet, because I had 5 or 6 other people say, hey, you know what? My internet went completely down too. And they said it was this, that, or the other as an excuse why the internet's been down for days, day here, day there, day everywhere. I don't know if it's a reset on the internet lines or whatever, but there's always the excuse of a torn cable. You can't tell me 6 other people wrote me and said, hey, I had a torn fiber optic cable in my area. The internet was out for a day. You experienced something like that last week. So did I. What's going on right now, Ransom? What do you think?
I don't know. I was looking at earlier, people were reporting on internet outages. I didn't quite catch it. Mine was just simply, for whatever reason, they ran a bobcat into the little box that gives everybody their coax cables off the cable feed. So they just straight up drove into it, knocked us out. So I don't know what the deal with that is. But like I said, I've been seeing other people reporting on these internet outages, and I think what it is they're having a conniption because they can't control the information flow. And the more they try to control it, the more it seems to be getting out. Like the more people are looking into certain topics that they wouldn't normally look at, but then they heard someone tell them don't do it. And it's kind of having that Streisand effect on a lot of, you know, wake up moments. And you sent me that text back, that's a WTF moment. Some weird stuff's going on around the world. As you can see, they're already promoting lots and lots of food issues with fast food. So, finally, certain people in the US population are going to feel the effects of missing things that may not have before because they've been taking a vacation, embracing kind of this socialistic break where they get the little money from the government. Meanwhile, they don't go to work, the businesses aren't open. And I saw an article that was pointing out in Europe, they're saying one of the biggest reasons for some of the food shortages that you're about to have is simply because lockdowns happened and people were staying home instead of going to work, which slowed the progress at each part of the just-in-time system. There was no one there when it was just in time to get something, which also means a lot of people weren't working at places that do growing, or you can just imagine the different businesses and things that were just out because their governments told them there's a boogeyman and you need to close your doors, you need to lock up tight, you need to even cover your face and go into hiding because we said so. And guess what? I think that we nailed it right on the head earlier in the year or even last year when we talked about they would probably give us a break this summer. And then what's happening now is you're hearing all of the governments talking about relocking down everything. And I thought it might have to do with some of these other articles I've been seeing that are basically the beginnings of antagonistic behavior or maybe reasons to go to war between many different nations. And that's rare earth minerals. And as you know, China kind of has a stranglehold and control of all of the accessible right now, ready to go rare earth minerals. And in other places where it exists, there's just no industry and they're not pulling it out of the ground. So China is in a unique position right now where they have backdoors in all the chips around the world, and there are no replacement chips available because you cannot make them yourself. You have to get even the raw ingredients to make technology from the Communist Party. So what a big world government play, or they threw down that card just to add it with all of the other weird things that are going on, like governments turning like East Germany type governments all over the world, including here. To say that that's not happening, you haven't been paying attention. And then think about those poor people in Cuba and the poor people in Hong Kong that have this, romanticized idea about Americans and how they would fight for freedom and all of this stuff. Meanwhile, over here, it's kind of, going out in a whimper, while these other countries really believe in the idea that we used to have. But, sorry, Cubans, when you get here, you're just running from, one horrible situation, and then you're going to get to see the fall kind of a nice civilization into what you just left. That's my thoughts on things right about this time. And then we can get into who's growing food because you're about to get hungry.
I had the romanticized ideas, raising some hives, having bees, being a beekeeper, and having being stung 3 times today up and down my arm. It's the same wake-up call that I should have had my gloves on, and I thought I was all in harmony, and they were, humming today, and it was nice weather. It had been raining for 5 days before this, and I was gonna, take them off and, putting some sugar water in there on a 1-to-1 ratio because they looked a little hungry. So I thought, okay, they're my friends. They are not your friends. I got stung up and down my arm. And then I have hornets all up and down the side of my house looking for a new nest to start. What you think in nature is your friend, what you think of systems is your friends. Yeah, you can coexist. But in terms of that, your perception in your mind of what it is entirely different, possibly in the real world. Because what I'm looking at, this rail stoppage from the West Coast eastbound out to Chicago and points east, Oklahoma. There's a lot of farmers that are waiting for potash right now because their crops have been behaving so poorly this year due to a gamut of things, from droughts to floods to extreme cold to flattening from wind and hailstorms and mud flows and whatever it would be. Farmers are demanding potash now so they can jack the plants, and I mean adrenalize the plants by putting as much potash on them as they can right now to try to get some yield out of it versus turning it to straw for the year. Problem is, potash is not a light substance. You buy it by the ton. You actually buy it by rail cars, or a minimum order for some farmers would be 100 rail car delivery of potash. So the problem is, for 7 full days, everything in the agribusiness central grow belt is going to be delayed. Now think about that for a second. No deliveries are coming on rail for a full 7 days. So they say now it's going to last for 7 days. But what if it lasts 9 days, 10 days? This is an integral grow period right now to add whatever adjuvants to a plant in a garden, on the fields, whatever it is, to get that crop yield out, to get to some sort of saleable product at the end of the year. But with that westbound cargo or eastbound cargo originating from the west, and they were talking specifically about Tacoma, Washington Port, and Long Beach, California, all stoppages. And anything that's in Chicago that would transit from there as a hub. And Chicago is a large place, an enormous amount of rail traffic. I didn't realize 1/3 of all rail traffic in America transits through Chicago. 1/3 of all traffic in America goes through there. It's halted at least 7 days. Now, this is Union Pacific. But again, Warren Buffett had, the way that things turn, if you're looking back in history in hindsight, Warren Buffett had bought 85% of all railroads in the United States. And you wonder why. I was saying, just from what I knew about the grand solar minimum, that bridges and highways and an enormous amount of things would have more difficulty as the crust of our Earth starts to crack and fissure as we enter the second magnetic field, which we are in August of this year. Well, the easiest thing to repair is going to be railroad tracks. That is the easiest thing to repair in terms of infrastructure. Natural gas pipelines, that's super difficult. Unless you're going to go old school and you got to have compression stations between that. Okay, yeah, you can fix the pipe. But can you fix the compression between the stations? Railroad tracks are something quite different. You lay down more metal, you're running a train again. And you see how long it takes cities to put down a road. You'd be 2 years later and they're trying to finish 4 feet of a road somewhere. Pork belly project. Warren Buffett bought all the railroads, 85%. I'm not going to say all. Stoppage of traffic. All I can say that these are definitely interconnected here. The amount of food shortages that are going to be put forth from this point, the knock-on effect, as you talked about ransom when you first came on the program here, when it was knocking on from all those people didn't go to work, those just-in-time people didn't arrive on time. They were told to stay home. Oh, people aren't growing. But what about the delivery mechanisms to get the potash in the field? If you're delayed 7 to 10 days, by the time it arrives at the terminal, outbound to another smaller destination, and you finally get it to the fields, we're talking a 3-week delay at the minimum, right in the integral grow time right now when they're expecting more rain because of the amount of smoke in the air. That there's going to be a lot more rainfall coming after this, just like on a real heavy night of fireworks. So farmers are desperate to get potash to put in the fields because they know the rain's coming, but they don't have what they need to make the plants grow faster. And, I'm not a fan of petrochemicals. I'm not a fan But potash is a natural substance in some fashions, but most times it comes as a byproduct out of a secondary process. So I'm just going to leave it there. You know, this is going to be detrimental to getting food to the plate later on in the year. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah. You know, I've been just sitting here going over these articles that seem to me to be interconnected. So, you know, when I'm seeing all of these articles, there was one that was talking about British in the UK specifically would have empty shelves because of this thing that we're talking about, which is basically the world went on break because they said so. So you have all of these places that are just imagine anything on a conveyor belt. If you think about economies and shipping kind of like a conveyor belt, every little station along that conveyor belt was taking a break, and or they got told to not, you know, work, or whatever the case is. Everybody's been doing this, and now is the wake up call, because, you know, there's been some legal maneuvering to make sure that corporations and banks are protected, but not the peon. So if you've been sitting there in your house not paying the rent, or, you know, you haven't been paying the lease, or you haven't been paying the rent or payment on your building or your business, whatever the case may be, they're going to come take that. And then you're going to be out. Plus, you haven't been making money to justify sitting around taking a vacation, because most people know you can't just sit around. You can't take a vacation unless you've earned it. You just can't do it. I mean, you can't afford it. And then when you think about all of these people that burn through their what I call inherited wealth, because most of the time, in most cases that I've noticed, the people themselves did not earn the wealth that they had. It's more their parents and their grandparents who, you know, busted a hump for decades and you know, made investments, or they got a retirement fund or IRAs or whatever it is that they did to plan for their thing. So nowadays people do not even have that. And in my opinion, we're coming, you know, right up into the, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say right now, today is the beginning of the first phase of culling the population. And I think everybody that watches this channel knows what I'm talking about. It's happening everywhere. People are, you know, and I've talked about it before about the population plateau and the overpopulation myth. It is true that there is a overpopulation problem, density problem, where too many people live in a confined space in cities. However, there's plenty of room on this earth for the amount of people there are now, but in a natural, you know, natural way, it's just going to plateau off. I mean, there's just so many people that are of a certain age that unfortunately they leave. And it seems like the power elite has just, you know, put a foot on their bum and shoved them right closer to, you know, that gateway to the next realm. So a bunch of people are just disappearing. Plus, you know, all of a sudden people are having all these weird allergies all over the place. And I've been reading some pretty good medical literature, and I'm not going to be specific, obviously, but basically what they were talking about is things that are happening right now that have never happened, that the entire world somehow agreed to do at the same time. And there are cults forming to go after the other people that don't want to be part of their cult. But all of those people, I've seen really good medical evidence of doctors, PhDs, inventors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that are talking about a large portion of the population is just going to croak out within the next 3 years due to allergies or side effects of certain life choices and cult followings that they've recently decided to follow. I hope that's not too coded, but there's a, you know, as you know, there's an issue on YouTube about certain words and their algorithms, but I think our audience is intelligent enough to know what's going on, and they know what life events we're talking about and what changes are dramatic. And like I said, we're about to go into phase 2 of complete prison planet world lockdown during a culling event. This morning, a friend of ours that has a YouTube channel was showing them, you know, culling the herd, where they were getting the older cattle out to make room for more, you know, calves and whatnot. Unfortunately, that's just part of the process. If you like animals, they got to go, to the next phase of this conveyor belt. And that, in a sense, is a good analogy for what is going on right now with Earth's hominid population are being shoved into an extinction event, at least as far as intellectual accumulation of knowledge through family units. And now we're going into a non-family friendly, kind of like Crowley said, we're going into that Horus age where do as thy wilt, and the government's behind that idea because it's even more destructive and divisive. So in my opinion, they're calling, they're just letting people do it themselves. They're giving everybody a little help into the grave with different programs that are going on. I hope that wasn't too cryptic, Dave.
Mr. Morse, I understood every message that you sent, every dash, every dot. And it's all about using your mind right these times. Understand that the vibration frequency in the message going out is of darkness, of despair, of hopelessness. And that's the message they want you to believe. But we, as a waking, sentient being, living, thinking, gift of the earth from our God, our Creator, allows us to have our own thoughts. Now, you can believe what you see on black screens, or you can take that with a grain of salt and say, you know what? I don't resonate with that message. I resonate with peace, harmony, compassion, sharing, cooperation, and community. And everything that I see on this dark screen that I am witnessing at the moment is going to pass me by. Because I have nothing to do with that. I want nothing to do with that. I am vibrating above that I'm going to be miles above, looking down at that dark energy, where I'm going to be so far above here that even if these teams come in around, they won't even see me. I'll be invisible because I'm vibrating at such a fast level that the darkness that is ensued, that envelops the mind of the teams, they won't even see me. And I'm hoping that they did get special medicine because they won't behave normally. They're cognitively a little bit impaired. But think about using the mind at the moment to try to vibrate above the chaos. Because frequency and vibration are like tunes on a radio station. You can go to 105.5 or you can go to 107.3. Where we currently sit somewhere is probably a negative 35.6, and I want to be way up at like 1,670 plus. So far above vibrationally that I'm invisible to their spectrum. That's where my mind's at right now. A lot of people are thinking, I'm going to run out to the countryside and I'm going to hide and I'm going to bite my nails and hope they don't come knocking. Well, I'm at the point here, I'm living with the earth, I'm putting my fingers in the soil, my feet are bare, I walk through the earth, I decompress, I de-energize daily. I wild forage for the mushrooms from today. We got these most amazing puffball mushrooms are growing everywhere after this heavy rain. And please be careful if you're going to wild forage. You really, and can I say it again, really need to identify what species you're going to eat, whether it's a vegetative, leaf, a seed, a fruit, a mushroom, whatever it is. You really need to double check and make sure you got the right species and it is edible. But, putting that fingers in there and decompressing every day, the way I'm thinking is they're never going to touch us out here. They're never coming by here. This is not their place. They're never coming. And putting this giant halo and dome around this area. That it's not even their place. They'll vibrate through it. They won't see it. That it's not their place. They don't sit. We're here for harmony and peace, and we are the new generation. We are the new world that is forming that will overtake this darkness. And that's the way I think every day is this is not coming to me. This is going to blow past us across people who want that, like you say, that conflict. They want that in their mind. They want it. They want the challenge. They want it. Okay, people are going to resonate and go with that equivalent energy over that direction. Over here, it's just about living in harmony with the earth, peace, tranquility. I want none of this transition. And if you can use your mind right now, which is such a powerful thing, because the way the sun is stepping down in its frequency and the second magnetic field is forming, such a special time in human history. This has only happened once in the prior 2,000 years. And if you know anything about magnetic looping torus waves and toroid magnetic fields, the Earth is going to sit between two toroid magnetic fields as one steps down. The giant, the Earth, in the middle between the sun that's stepping down in its frequency, but then Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are forming their own magnetic field. And the resonant frequency changes in our brain is the reason you're being controlled, because you can manifest faster. You're becoming a superhuman with your thought. The thoughts are vibrating faster. It's a completely different frequency we're stepping into. The elite understand that the old, dark, heavy, top-down, pyramidal, eye at the top system won't work in the new vibration. So hence the Great Reset. Because the elite want to stay in power, but they understand the frequency field changes. That's why so many people are waking up and questioning, oh, why was it this? Why was it that? We can't have the old. We need the new. Because a new structure needs to be set for the elite to continue to retain power in a higher, faster vibrational frequency. And don't kid yourself. You might talk about light and love and harmony and whatever it is for the vibration that's going faster every day as we exit out of the Kali Yuga right into the Dwapara Yuga. But that is fraught with its own set of the old dark energy, like a great white shark trying to nibble you at the foot and pull you back down into the darkness. But you got to understand that power that was over us for 400 years, from slavery to central banking to wars, that stops now because everybody sees through it. And it's not just because social media. Social media is just a sign of the times that the vibration changed, that the frequency field changed. Interconnectivity amongst all human beings has changed. I mean, you look at somebody who wants to start a war now, and you're like, come on, that's so stupid. Why would you do that? Come on, that's so fake. You're faking that nobody, and then people come out on the streets and they protest that. It's everything's so fake that you can see through the politics. You can see through the politicians. You can see through the narratives. You can see the control mechanisms visible. It's like going through just a glass sheet. You can see everything bare in front of you now. Problem is, those elites still want to continue to control power. So the Great Reset is here because they still want control as we enter the new world. Ransom, I'm done ranting.
No, that's great. I like how you keep it positive with everything, and I agree with that. I'm a pretty positive person. It's kind of weird that I do what I do now, where I just look at these patterns and go over all these patterns, and unfortunately, I see negative patterns. Like, I knew about monkeypox a long time ago, and if I'm not mistaken, at least for sure confirmed Russia was playing with monkeypox in a biowarfare setting. See, I'm allowed to talk about this because this is history. So if I'm just, linking around, I would imagine just, deductive logic that if Russia was doing it, the United States was doing it, China was probably doing it, maybe even the UK doing it somewhere, playing with monkeypox, mousepox, et cetera, and then you see these, headlines, which, by the way, is something that I've talked about with many people, and I've told them, don't worry about any of these headlines that talk about this cold or that flu or whatever. Worry about it whenever you see monkeypox or something like that have an outbreak. Now, there's no outbreak, so don't get alarmed to anybody listening, but you should keep it in mind. It's like even though you're positive thinking and you got a great positive field around you and you're only talking to positive people, you still need to pay attention to the fast curveballs that may smack you in the head if you're not paying attention. Be open-minded, but don't let your mind fall out or be controlled in some cases. But anyway, the CDC has confirmed monkeypox in the United States. You should probably pay attention to this, and I agree you should pay attention to this, but that's not the only one. There's this other weird monkey bee virus, I was trying to read I thought it was monkeypox, but it's not. This is some other China virus from China. It's monkey bee. So, there's an endless amount of curveballs that they can throw at you to make, every person fear and bow to their will and do their new rules. I mean, there's an endless amount of emergencies that you cannot let go to waste. But one that we kind of know is coming is just kind of the dissolving of utilities and stuff like that, because some changes are coming. And believe me, the government's all prepared for it. They're good to go. They got their bunkers, they got their cool tech, they got their hardened infrastructure, they got their EMP proof satellites, they got all of their stuff. But guess what? They're not sharing that with you. And like using the Flint situation in Michigan, where they had a bunch of dirty water and a bunch of government people, inspectors, and the government was there to protect them, but failed to do so, which was your job, to know about the water where you live and realize that maybe you shouldn't be drinking this water. I don't drink the water from where I'm from, but there was an epiphany. What I was thinking about this is that if tomorrow things kind of just went in the wind, and local government shut down for whatever reason, they may indeed shut their power and the water off to the people who are already going to be malnourished, because let's face it, most of the crops that you do get are already depleted. Plus, they've been covered in pesticide and fungicide and herbicide and etc., on top of being genetically modified, if that matters. I know some people think that's a conspiracy theory, but they are indeed playing with genes and different things. But what if they just turned off the water? There's going to be a lot of people that thought they were prepared, but they failed to realize that the whole thing that makes everything work and life work where they live is running water. And if you don't have a well, then you don't really have running water. You have city, I'm going to say toxic wastewater, because there are certain companies that are allowed to put their chemicals in the water. They're not allowed to put those same chemicals in the environment, because that would be bad for the environment. They would get fined, and OSHA and all of these people would get involved and take all their money. So they found a way to just, they dump it in the city water supplies. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, you should look it up. But we're going to get to the point that even all of these people that think they're secure in growing things on their properties, well, I got a big garden. I got, I've been canning and doing all this stuff. That's not enough. That's not enough if the utilities actually turned out, because guess what happens if you live anywhere in the Southwest is the minute that the water turns off is the minute that your garden dies, pretty much within a couple of days. And just imagine all these people really, I'm going to say, naive to the fact that things can turn off. And then let's not kid ourselves, there will be an event probably that turns off the electricity for everyone, and we've gone over that ad nauseum, all of the different things that spring from that. But what about just plain being starved while you're eating the food? So people are getting some food, and they're eating it, and I'm sure they think they're healthy and whatever. They're eating their greens and their vegetables, and then all of a sudden one day they got colon cancer or whatever cancer, and they just can't figure it out. That might have been because responsibility has been taken out of the public. So when you talk about having good vibes and all that, it's really easy to have good vibes and good thoughts when you're pretty confident in yourself and your abilities and where you're going with your plan and your motivation and your goals. But for those people that just live week to week, which happens to be probably, I'm going to say 90% of people are stuck in the pay bills, live life about bills. I mean, let's face it. I myself have not worked like at an official job, I guess, for 16 years since I was raising my kid. That's the reason. But I just realized, why was I even, going out and breaking my back for nothing in my own future? And then, it kind of dawned on me that all of these other people look like they're having a great life. They got their boats, they got their nice cars, they got their big houses. But what they don't realize for the lower class that looks up on them and thinks, well, they got it all, is they don't really own their boat. They don't really own their house. They don't really own their car. They lease it, they rent it, they make payments on it. And, to circle back what we were talking about all these properties that are going to be repossessed and a transformation of wealth. And I know you've heard that before from a sitting U.S. president talking about a fundamental transformation of the American society and transformation of wealth. I'm sure you can see that we're well into that. And what better way to totally snuff out any economic stuff than to shut everything down again, which, mark my words, that's happening. Just like before, they'll let all of these other countries do it first, and then we'll do it. And then you'll have the governors virtue signaling about they need to close and you need to get your medications. We live in a really bizarre time because that I kind of opened up before you came on with talking about the last bit of freedom that any organism ever had was the right to control their own body and what goes into their body, like from a single-celled organism all the way up to, if you consider yourself the highest of a life form, we all have the right to live out our lives and choose what goes into our body. I mean, that's just fundamental of nature. And, like I was saying, a lot of people really think that they've been living that way, but, they're going to come to find out that they're malnourished. And when the food shut off, they're going to have more problems than the next guy that, say, maybe he's been eating lamb's quarter out the yard for months, or some other person that's been eating wild clover and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're talking about that edibles. I made a discovery that the people that lived in the property before me were very smart, and I was very ignorant because, I recently only got into growing my own food, coming to the conclusion that that's a necessity for each individual on this planet, is to be able to feed themselves. And then I go out here and I'm looking and I'm identifying what I thought were pests and weeds, and I come to find out 90% of everything growing in my yard wild is an edible someone put there on purpose. I have Australian sea bush that makes little berries and you can eat the leaves. There's lamb's quarter, all over the place. Indian peas that you pull up, it's got a little tuber at the bottom of it. I mean, these people were already thinking in the way that we all need to be thinking, where you create the environment with your positive vibe that you have, that you want to live in, and other people will see that and they'll want that. And we used to call that kind of the American dream. But, you had to be asleep to believe it, because in reality, everybody was somehow enslaved to some system that was meant to put us in the place we're at now, which is at the breaking point. And in my opinion, we're just at that point that countries are still denying that they have fallen to a communist style government, because that's basically what's going on right now. We do what China says. China does what the world government wants them to do. Everybody's kind of all playing the same game now. It's just a question of which, faction is going to be the head of that, and who is it that rules them.
I'll trade you a Lamborghini for a 50,000-gallon water storage tank.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And by the way, all the politicians out there, I'm taking up a new hobby. And, with my, I'll digress here, and with my food that we're growing, almost everything is blemished. It's difficult to get any tomatoes where an insect hasn't nibbled onto, because we don't use pesticides at all.
Okay.
I use an enormous amount of nutrient mix, organic. I know it might be not organic, but it is a nutrient mix. Like chicken dung and different kinds of seaweeds and algae. Of course, it's been washed. Mycorrhizae. We make our own biochar and charcoals and mix in different adjuvants to fluff the soil with soil builders and that sort of thing. No chemicals, and everything's probably 95% blemish free, but you're always going to find a couple little nicks or, marks on a tomato. We got the grapes coming in pretty well, but there seems to be a little leaf damage on there. Japanese beetles ripped through everything, but I'm not going to spray the food I'm eating. I don't care. We're going to lose some. You understand if you can use soap and water to take care of a lot of beetles and different problems. But growing your own food is a task that takes hours and hours every day of several people just to keep the basics going. You can do it. And I love it. You know, I bought several foraging guides here, and plantains are coming on strong right now. Sassafras, there's a bunch. Like I have a forest plot as well as a flat land, say pasture plot. So in the forest, there's an enormous amount of things growing at the moment, but they're all, you know, juvenile plants that are chest high max. Some are knee high. But if you know what you're looking for, you can go and like forage a salad for the evening. And the gardens we have growing in the back, they're growing too fast, too much, where two people can't eat everything because it's growing too quickly. Yeah. And we're going to till part of it up and start over again. Yeah, because, you know, and trying to put things in rows versus just spreading seed. And there's an enormous amount of little tricks to try to get everything. But that water you mentioned, Ransom, you hit it on the head. You don't have water. You don't have anything. And I'm not kidding about a 50,000 gallon or a 10,000 or a 5,000 or even a 250 gallon storage tank. Wherever you can collect water, like we have 3 different streams that come down our mountainside here. Plus we have a pond that's in front of us that's spring fed, and both of our neighbors have wells. I haven't drilled mine yet because like 10 grand to drill a well here. And wow. Yeah, it's like 10,000 and it goes down about 120 feet. But then we need to run extra electric from the house way back to the well where it's going to be on the property. You know, so if you're going to get wells, you know, please put it into perspective here. If you're going to drill a well on your property, and this is in East Tennessee where it's super cheap and it's super shallow, still 10 grand is the minimum you're going to spend on a well. But I know where you're at, Ransom, you know, you're talking about 30, 40, 50 to put a well down in there. And you got to think about the ROI on that, or, you know, how much food it's going to be. And I have plentiful water resources around where we're at here, plentiful. But if you're in a desert area or you don't, and you're reliant on only cedar water, you're going to have a serious problem. You know, water is the key to life. And that's the whole reason that the North African and the Sahel region is becoming wetter with the shift to the West African monsoon, and why so many superpowers are interested in suddenly Africa. And you got to wonder why this maniacal, you know, program to send all these guys away from the Central African or the Northern African countries and let them go wherever they want across the planet is. You don't want to resist. You don't want any resistance when you come back in to take that food growing area away. Think about that. 10 million men have left and gone to different, you know, dreams in different areas, different countries, different continents. 10 million men have left the Sahel and Central Africa and Northern Africa to go follow bigger dreams elsewhere. But for superpowers coming in, that's a 10 million man army that won't be there when you want to go get the largest new food growing area coming online from the above ground water rain. The above ground, I'm talking about clouds and different types of precipitation patterns shifting to drop an enormous amount more moisture over North Africa, Central Africa, and the Sahel, and the below water resources, which Gaddafi started to get into with the Nubian aquifer. You got to think about that for a second. That is a vast area where you don't need to displace anybody to put in 13 million square kilometers of crops. Whoever controls that grow zone controls the 21st century, period. Water is incredibly important. Incredibly important.
You know, I love when you say these things because, you know, my mind just works that way. So you were making me think. So we're talking about massive migrations to the scale that probably hasn't been seen since the ancient world, where massive amounts of people relocate from one place to another. And it's not just the Middle East and Africa moving into Europe. There's also Central, Northern South America, and Southern North America, all moving up to, you know, more northern latitudes for whatever reason. At the same time, you have mega corporations, billionaires going south, buying up everything. Now think about that. It's obvious that there were several empires in the Americas right in that same area that all the turmoil is happening and most of the migrants are coming from. So you had the whoever the what are they called with the big heads? The Olmecs, they disappeared. Then there was some kind of megalithic people, they disappeared, and then the Mayans came and they disappeared. The Aztecs came, their empire disappeared too. Now, remnants of their DNA, I'm not arguing, are not still in those same parts. However, all of those empires at one time or another died out because of whatever reason. Now, there's a cyclical nature to the die out and rebirth of a fertile area, like you're talking about. It would make sense that if you knew that information, finding new governments and new property rights to be in the right place at the right time. So maybe if the Central American area, like it is now, is the jungle and stuff, but what if it became a better, farm area than anywhere else, which they do grow a lot of stuff in those areas right now. It's great farmland. So imagine they're growing all the food up there, but in the northern hemisphere, maybe the weather might change just a little bit. Maybe they're, the El Nino and the Nina switch up on their cycles there and go to different places at different times than they're supposed to. Or monsoons, like this is the first monsoon that we've had for, I'm going to say, a decade that I remember, where we actually got several bands of thunderstorms coming through here. And hopefully it's not over yet. But for the past, decade, when they were talking about, everybody's dying, we're all going to burn up on the earth, it was just a weather fluctuation, obviously, because Diamond on the OPR made a really good point the other day on a show he was talking about, where he was pointing out these once in a 400 year or once in a 4,000 year whatever things that they keep saying, look, man's destroying the environment, at the same time as they're saying, well, we haven't had a storm like this in a couple hundred years. So what was happening 200 years ago? Was man ruining the environment then? And your critical thinking skills have to say no. Matter of fact, I don't think any, Paleolithic people were driving SUVs around during the end of the Younger Dryas, at the end of the Ice Ages and things like that. So critical thinking skills. So what does that mean? If everybody's being forced out of their lands or given incentive to move, and then the really rich people are moving back to where the poor people are moving from, you might think there might be a pattern developing there. Failed states to the north, utter chaos, destruction. And then you got to think about, how long did it actually take the plan to destroy Europe? Because most people would agree they're on the way out right now. I mean, not only have mathematically most of their populations being replaced, but also just all kinds of strife going on now, and weird lockdowns, rules, fighting in the streets, something that Europe hasn't seen since World War II, but it's happening right now. And then over here on the flip side, you have North America being encouraged to be waves of people to come up here for a better life, only to soon find out, I think the better life might be moving south for whatever reason, and it might be, maybe related to the weather. I'm just saying.
You're just telling the truth. To the politicians, I'm taking up a new hobby. But you got to think about where the bands of moisture and the new grow zones will emerge as the old, what was known as grow zones, start to diminish their output. And the better term to use is go offline. When there's a diminishment each year on how much tonnage of yield will come out of each country that are really far north. Like Canada's going to be coming to a real difficult situation producing a lot of crop this year. And Australia as well. And then you could throw in the mouse plague and everything in Australia. In South Africa, forget the politics, forget what happened last week and the week before, and the food shortage is going there, which is going to set the country back. But the farming community there, everything is stopped. See, this is another thing a lot of people are not talking about. Periphery countries that are in a freeze event at the moment, such as like swing producer nations, Brazil, hitting huge crop losses right now, along with Argentina. But the rest of the world kind of looks at Brazil and Argentina as a swing producer in case the U.S. or Canada or parts of China can't produce. Then they'll go over to Brazil and say, hey, we didn't get as much as we thought we could out of northern, XYZ, 45 north and above, whatever latitude that is, northern Europe, northern parts of China, Canada, whatever. Can you give us a few extra 10, 20, 30 million tons? Normally they would say, yes, we even have extra in the silos. But seeing how they just lost up to 70% of their entire crop this year, that is a zero no-go there. That's below zero. China is having the largest floods almost ever recorded, going back at least 1,000 years. And you thought the floods there bad last year. They're having dams collapsing this year, one after another, and they're looking for the fourth dam collapsing today. Further down in the grow zones, I mean, we are in the middle. Imagine 4 dams collapsing in the middle of Kansas. That's where China sits at the moment. And there's more. There's a typhoon going up there that's going to drop feet of rain, in addition to the other weather front that's going to drop feet of rain. So when these two collide, I'm really curious what's going to happen. But when you look at the periphery nations and these like swing nations that provide for other parts of other continents, South Africa is a major grain producer for the rest of Africa. So regardless if whatever political affiliation, doesn't really matter. But what happened down in South Africa is going to stop all the agricultural production because their supply chains have ceased to zero. It's going to be months before anything comes back. They were coming into the harvest season at the very end. They got hit with record cold. Corn is gone because they couldn't get it out of the fields. Now what? So places like Egypt that rely on southern South African exports, they're going to start looking around the planet for others as well. So there's going to be this huge domino knock-on effect ping-balling all over the planet. And it hits this year. There's very little yield. America is at some of the lowest wheat production since the 1980s. You got to realize America is going back to 1988 for wheat production. That's how much we've lost in America. Canada's even worse. Canada might have some canola oil, great, but you can't really turn that into much. China's almost offline completely. They lost everything this year again, everything. And Brazil lost 70% of its crops. And South Africa lost. And Australia's down. Where does that leave us for the rest of the planet? I mean, really, if you're going to do the Rubik's Cube on this and you're going to try to do the mathematics and put formulas in on plus, 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 minus, 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 a lot of countries are going to go without food at the end of the year here, and you're going to watch prices spike to you're going to see prices spike to levels that you thought were nigh impossible. And you got to wonder on a family of 4 what that's going to do to people around this planet. We in the States are going to be one of the last affected nations on these food price rises. Pakistan, they're already spending 70% of their money on food. What happens if their prices double, which they're going to? Then what? I mean, you saw Afghanistan, U.S. pulls out. Who knows what's going to happen to their agriculture there? India has just massive floods across grow zones as well in Maharashtra. This is it. This is the year. And I'm saying Jupiter is the cause moving past this magnetic field line. And as soon as that moves past, every storm is going to be a once in a 2,000 year event, once in a 1,000 year event. And how do they know it's a once in a 1,000 year flood? Unless they did the study to know when the high water marks were 1,000 years ago, when there were no SUVs, Ransom. Call them on it. They keep talking about the once in a 1,000 year flood, but there were no SUVs 1,000 years ago. So where does that bring us? Especially with record cold, coldest in 1,000 years. Thanks for listening to our rant in the first hour here. David Dubine, Ransom Godwin, 420 TV, Freedomist Films, 1776 on the dial. Move back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Take a short break. Get out the calculator to see how many tons were lost this year.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Be evasive. but that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
And Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, and there were giants in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, then came unto the giants before the Nephilim.
And sons of God, plural. They weren't talking about Jesus coming down.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I'm Steve Crawford, host of Factor Theory Live. Join me every Sunday night from 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Standard Time on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Check it out.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope.
We've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. But time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour right here, Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine, along with Ransom Godwin, 420 TV Freedomist Films, 1776. If you want to check out the graphics tonight, streaming right over on YouTube. Before the break, I was trying to talk about a few of the crop losses going on. And right now we can talk about that. But you've seen with the current regime in power that even BitChute is now being affected, where across the EU, BitChute is now being put into a corner where they're going to limit reach on videos from BitChute, which is supposedly the freest venue for video, along with Brighteon and Rumble, Odyssey. But you can see as BitChute became the second biggest after YouTube, suddenly, they want to keep the revenue coming in, and then there's suddenly rules. So the reach is going to be limited if you say things across BitChute in the EU. Well, that's always how it starts. Remember how the website said, oh, it's just an EU thing. Now there's GDR across every site. I don't care what country you're in. Everybody has to do that little cookie thing. Well, that started only in the EU also. So you got to wonder what's going to happen with BitChute. What was a bastion of freedom? You could say anything about anything on there. I mean, as long as you weren't calling for violence, which you never should. But now if you have a different opinion on, birth genders, etc., you're not allowed to watch that video in the EU. So BitChute is going to have to go through and catalog every single video if it fits the criteria for whatever type of speech across the EU and limit the reach across EU. What happens when other countries, other continents do the same? BitChute will become another YouTube. How about Revolution Radio right here, freedomslips.com. Consider a donation to keep free speech like this on the air so we can talk. Although, since Ransom's broadcasting here live, 420 TV Freedomist Film, 1776 on YouTube, we need to be a little coded, but I think everybody's smart enough to understand the lexicon that we, as cunning linguists, toss your direction. Ransom, I'm glad we're back for the second hour. These crop losses are going to definitely raise the price of food to the point where I think most people don't really understand the price increases, the selection inavailability. And if I do say my own pet project here on the farm at the moment is we're not going to raise chickens. There's so many other farmers around us where we can just go buy eggs right now or trade for eggs. So we're going to take that chicken house, which is 20 feet long, 8 feet wide, and we're going to turn it into a greenhouse. We're just going to do simple cattle panel, and we're going to loop it over, and then we're going to, I already bought the poly for it, the 6mm poly sheeting. And we're going to convert that chicken house into a greenhouse because I believe, now this is my own opinion, coming into this winter, we're going to get some big-ass volcanic eruptions. And that's going to send a lot of ash into the atmosphere. And I want to be able to grow food in a greenhouse. Plus, we can run an extension cord if we need to from our house 100 feet, 120 feet, and put a heater in it for the winter. So, having that ability, instead of having to dig an underground conduit, send, 800, 900 feet of cable up to heat a greenhouse in the back pasture, we're going to do it close to home. Just do a greenhouse out of a chicken coop and put some stuff under plastic, knowing we're going to try to grow food during the winter. I cannot reiterate how essential it's going to be able to grow your food during this time.
I'm having difficulty already. I mean, you were talking earlier about, you plant a bunch of stuff and every year's different. You're going to get one year, just like last year, we had tomatoes, a little bit of squash. This year, my fridge is full of squash already, and it's growing so fast. It's way more than we need, or we're eating fast enough. So obviously, we have to save it. But I wanted to point out to some people, we're talking about these crop losses and different things. For the people that are growing food, and we were talking about, losing your water. A lot of people live in places where it rains plenty, so they probably don't have anything to worry about like that. However, you're going to still not have power. And I was watching a video the other day where some guy took some junk and a nice window and some like galvanized steel, and one of the viewers sent it to me so I could look at it, and I was like, wow, you know, why don't I have 3 of those out in my yard? So basically, he just slapped together with some metal, some wood, and an old window, a nice solar cooker, and he had a thermostat in there, and they were just cooking beans all day out in Arizona. Now, it gets pretty hot out there, but it gets hot in a lot of places. So I'm sure that you could use several solar stoves, and if you can make a solar stove to take care of that little niche, that little problem, I'm sure there's billions of other little things that you can do that would take care of niches. Like I do live in New Mexico, so we get plenty of sunshine. And, you know, if I didn't have a hot water heater, but I still had water, at least, just water is really all you need. So say the power did go out and for some reason, you know, whatever reason, you still got water pressure where you live. All you have to do is, you know, let the pressure build up in a couple of black hoses. You know, actually, you don't even have to use black, but if the temperatures are more frigid, you want to use black hose, and you can have, you know, I don't know, 80, 90 gallons worth of hot water that's just hot because of the sun beaming down on it. So you make little tanks of coiled hoses, and the water just sits in it and sits in the sun. You can have these solar stoves, et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to get to a couple points that go along with these food shortages and get your opinion on it, David. One of them is, I don't know if you've been seeing, you know, like the thing that was going on in Haiti, but there's a couple of other countries recently in the last 2 days in the headlines. I forgot which countries they were. I didn't even really read the other ones, but I was just thinking it kind of made me think when I first saw that, you know, what do these countries have in common? And it didn't take me but a short time to figure out at least 2 of the countries are countries that are negative towards making their citizens take medications. Both countries are also countries with the possibility of great agriculture, and yet their countries are weirdly, for no apparent reason, being targeted by military forces to take out what stable government they have. Now, if you extend this to, you know, what's going on in Cuba, what's going on in Taiwan versus China, Israel, Iran, the Ukraine, Russia, which is really just us and Russia, and all of these little shatter belt areas, and you know, these proxy government antagonizations, you can tell that there's like one group with one goal pulling the strings. They're kind of pulling it to a movie that they've showed you many a times, which coincides with you know, the times we're living in and what we're about to go through. But do you think that these smaller countries are being targeted because they're kind of like renegade places where the grid is not so intrinsic in their lifestyle, and also they're kind of more renegade when it comes to picking and choosing their leaders? Because, you know, in some of these countries, coups happen quite often, and then also you have, in the case of Haiti, what seemed to be and admitted priorly trained U.S. trained people in combat, if you know what I'm saying. You know, kind of like over in the Middle East, there we accidentally, you know, found some freedom fighters, and then we trained them, and then we armed them, and then we fed them full of a lot of radical ideas about their own culture, and then paid them to spread that. And then at the same time, somehow this big army showed up out of nowhere that destabilized the whole area. And I'm seeing this in microcosms and smaller nations all over the world. Do you think that's an indicator of that they're going to make us go through a third world war before we get well into earth changes, so that everybody's so scattered, so distracted, so distraught, that they can't point the finger at these people anymore that have known that this event was coming, and I'm going to say probably for millennia? Because, you know, again, with critical thinking and logical, you know, deductive logic, you think if all of these ancient societies were marking down time so specific, and they had a 52,000 year history of the precession of the equinox, that maybe, just maybe, the elites of our day with their technological advantage still know all the exact things and cycles that are coming to be and will be in fruition. So they know exactly. Basically, what we're in is we're the Mayan peasant that had to stand in front of the pyramid while some guy kind of gratified himself by telling everybody, hey, look, the sun's going to disappear unless you guys act like I want you to act, or like we want you to act. And then the sun disappears and everybody's freaked out. But, he knew it. His family knew it. They knew it for, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 15,000 years. However, it obviously went from person to person in some way or form, from person to person for at least 52,000 years. And they're trying to tell us that we were going around hunter-gathering, and, recent discoveries show that we were quite sophisticated humans in prehistory, building things. We had complex jewelry. No one can explain the high technology evidently left behind created things. Do you think that this is all putting us on a pivot to put us at war? Well, they're just kicking back, and they're going to go in their little holes and then come out in a decade or two with the right tools and the necessary know-how to go to the right places just to control all food, just like they wanted to. I could name, I don't know how many different people at different times that talked about, from Romans to Kissinger, about food is a weapon. So even if you're not just controlling the food, what if you're just manipulating who can grow it and who can't by destabilizing areas? And like you said, causing mass migration from one place to another. It's kind of like, that Tom Sawyer joke. Hey, look, we're having fun over here painting this fence. You want to come help us paint the fence? And then when everybody gets there painting the fence, they realize they got taken advantage of. And then, Tom Sawyer's off kicking it, being free, having a good time in the place that they were in. Sorry if that was long-winded. With all of those
never long-winded, my friend, never long-winded. Always a way to spur new ideas. And I want to talk about prophecy. How many prophets have you heard state that after the Third World War starts, forces will be fighting against each other, but something will happen in the heavens where everybody lays down their arms and returns to their families? So you can answer that question of the war would start first and then the celestial events would be second. Of course, they're going to deflect. What do you think? And by the way, to all the politicians, I've taken up a new hobby. So that would be the thing that would happen, is the deflection would come in there to distract everybody from looking at the ruling elite for not warning us, telling us the cycles were repeating. And imagine if you found the equivalent of the Library of Alexandria, but the NASA database of celestial phenomenon from not 80,000 years. And, if you want to talk about out-of-place artifacts, you could talk about the Chaldeans. You could talk about the Denisovans. But there was tech that makes no sense. And it is 6,000 years ago, Chaldeans, Black Sea area, there was a whole bunch of their cities that are 110 feet underwater that match up right off the coast of Israel with 110 feet underwater. So it seems there's a very advanced civilization that was making micro-fine holes in their jewelry of like diamond bit technology that we have today 6,000 plus years ago. But they're so far underwater, 110 feet. But you talk about Denisovans, which you've spoken about many, many times, but that's too recent. What's happened to the past interglacials? That 10,000 years of warmth. I mean, they didn't, anatomical similar human beings, thought capacity, physiology, etc. They didn't sit there for 10,000 years and do nothing. They were there for 10,000 years and they probably knew the cycles as well. So where are these repositories? Imagine if the Earth shifted and an entire civilization is now 10,000 feet underwater, but you got the Navy going in with their sonar, penetrating radar. They find that, and then they get into those caves and find the previous civilization from 118,000 years ago. Now, where's the civilization that was 221,000 years ago? because they were following the cycles also. So I've talked about Denisovans, way too recent. Lemuria, 70,000 years ago, entirely too recent. That's like a spring chicken in terms of what people have been following for cycles for the last 4 interglacials going back 500,000 years. Like, where's that information? Nobody ever talks about that. It's always 125 years of climate data. It's the coldest, it's the warmest. So I just only see manipulation moving from this point for distraction as groups of people understand these cycles with incredible precision. Like for me, knowing that, going back, let's go back into 2020 May. Pluto's atmosphere collapsed. Then fast forward 6 months, Uranus's atmosphere reversed itself. The storm reversed, the atmosphere reversed on a planet. And just a few months ago, Uranus's ring started jumping with X-rays off the planet, jumping out through the rings off into, and it was captured by cameras. And then we have Jupiter going on a 10x increase in its auroras, and Saturn the same. Now we got moons blasting an enormous amount of debris off of Saturn's moons and Jupiter's moons, shooting the highest volumes of water off of a moon out, escaping its gravitational pull where the water is going off into space. Like, these are the kind of energetic effects you would look for. And then just what's that, 2 weeks ago, the minerals on Mars started glowing from the electrical connection from the sun in the crust of Mars. Now, where do we sit in this whole thing within a few months from now? The distraction's got to be there for the human populace. What better distraction? I mean, okay, we're going to have these once in a 1,000-year floods that are everywhere right now are a direct indication that our planet's being affected just as much as Mars with mineral glow, Jupiter with a 10x increase in aurora. Can you imagine if our auroras increased 10x? That would be a grid down on our planet. That would be a quarantine event. You got reversing atmospheres, X-ray anomalies, compressing atmospheres. What's going to happen to our atmospheres? Ours is really dense compared to all the rest of them. And you see there's atmospheric anomalies happening on our planet right now, compression of the cloud cells. Jet streams are in the wrong place, and the cloud cells are looping and over on themselves and compressing in and overlapping on themselves. So how do you distract from that? Incredible food price rises, crop losses everywhere, cells of the clouds crashing, once in a 1,000-year flood, droughts everywhere, massive fires everywhere. This is it. We've crossed the magnetic line now. So how do you distract a planet? Everybody, I don't care what your religion is, what continent you sit on, what socioeconomic layer you live in, I don't care. Everybody needs to be distracted at the moment. So how do you distract ransom? And that would be my question is, all right, it's inbound, it's here. Now, what's the next great distraction? There's got to be one for the human populace because everybody's seeing it right now. So it's got to be beyond anything governmental. Is it a UFO invasion? I don't know. What do you think the next? You talked about chimeras jumping out of anti-gravity craft invented by our own governments, which wouldn't be, for a lot of people it would seem real, but for me, I think the same way you, like, yeah, get off my lawn, dude. So what do you think the next attraction will be? War? Because all the legends, I shouldn't say legends, excuse me, wrong phraseology there. Prophecy talks about forces, global forces battling on the battlefield, and enemies across the line see the signs in the heavens, and they both sides drop their weapons and say, you know what? I'm going home to my family. So what do you think the distraction will be to get us to that point where they see the signs in the skies?
Well, it's got to be something large. I mean, because what in my opinion they just pulled off was huge. I never thought I would see the day that the entire world agreed on a specific way or action to go, including supposed enemies and, secluded countries. And, it's so bizarre to see all of those people in Iran, doing the same exact things as what's going on in New Zealand or France or the United States, all in unison, all deciding that they all need to take the same medicines. They all decided that they needed to wear the same apparel at the same time. And these are people with, in certain countries like Iran or North Korea or whatever, they have a closed circuit system of their own. They're little tiny totalitarians, and they hide all their information there. So you can imagine if even those countries participated, that this is a high level distraction already what we're in. So in order to top something like 2 giant towers falling into their footprints, you would have to, bump it up to the next level. And then you'd give people a decade of propaganda, media, movies about a specific topic, zombies, viruses, etc., and then switch over to the next topic. Whatever that is has to be even bigger because the showmen like a show. And if you were the person like, the Wizard of Oz or whatever, hiding behind the cloak and running the clockwork, you know exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and when all of the things will be put in motion because of their time and place. The problem is there's the cog in the wheel that every so often when they need societies to build a technological, because in my opinion, with all information gathered, I've learned, in my opinion, I think mankind, a man type being, has been farming for like 1 million years on the planet Earth. Now, in my opinion, that kind of goes along with Sumerian tablets talking about Anunnaki type beings coming down from the heavens to the earth. They came and then they looked at this frozen ball on the ends, but it had a nice green stripe down the middle. They colonized, they worked. But if you were a, alien civilization, say, that had limited time, resources, manpower, that you might resort to things that even, like according to the text there, was against their ways, which was slavery, and then go ahead and make a little, not a slave, but a helper that's kind of like you, but was already on this planet. It kind of makes sense that the way that Cro-Magnon's bones just pop up, like they've been eating and farming for 1 million years or more, with this chin that's developed to eat food that's farmed, grained. I mean, most people agree that that's the functionality of the reason our heads are shaped the way they are, and the reason our jaws are the way they are, and the teeth are arranged that way, is because we've been eating farmed food for a really long time. And then the Sumerians say they got their civilization kicking off about 450,000 years ago here on Earth. And then, all kinds of things start changing over the next couple 100,000 years. Lots of hominid men of different forms just vanish. And then you're only left with one kind of, mixed up hybrid species that we are. And then all of a sudden we're back. If you were limited, kind of what I was getting at, if you were limited on all these resources, how many, hundreds of years would it take you to go from only having a couple of ships and a few hundred people into a civilization that could manufacture rare planetary elements that are necessary for a technological civilization of robotics, anti-gravitic devices and things? And then, you could stepstone back off of another civilization that you created if you had a long enough lifespan. So in my belief, something or someone that has a way longer lifespan than a human being has been keeping these elite right to rule families in power on a steady course with a steady plan. And, evidence of that is these rulers, these right to rule families of all different peoples around the world always had ancient celestial chronological knowledge of when and how the earth would be tilting at what degree, and always had the information about farming with them. They all of these civilizations have that in common, that they had some kind of complex mathematics and calendar system for farming, which, if you if you take into all that account, it seems like what we did is farm a technological civilization that no longer needs the builders. And I've been looking at a lot of commercials now, ironically, about AI lawnmowers, AI fruit pickers, AI tree shakers, AI this, AI that. They don't need you anymore. And even if you're in your positive bubble, they've admitted, and time again, they do what they say. When the elite say they're going to do something, they do it. And they say they're coming door to door. Now, it might be friendly the first time, and they might leave when they hear the shotgun click. But when they come back, they'll have more people that are willing to commit violence on someone else to make them do something. We've seen this time and time again. I'm just saying. So whatever this plan is, it doesn't involve the vast majority of the people on the earth. That's just my opinion.
Spider hole, get your position with your spider hole. For anybody who knew what that meant, you knew what that meant. But yeah, there's always going to be people trying to control as we move through. And see, that's the duality of the swing of the pendulum. We're coming into this magnificent time now where we have the greatest capability to manifest as a human being in probably the last 100,000 years. But at the same time, the elite dark powers understand this, and they're going to push back the most they've pushed back in 100,000 years. So where do we get in this duality, this battle? Is it always that the jinn get put back in the bottle for a certain amount of time? Or is it that these elite forces disappear underground and they pretend, give the illusion that they've been kicked back to the curb and they're really just hanging out underground? Because the hollow earth really does seem to resonate and have a lot of, if you look at a toroid looping magnetic field, at the top or bottom of a, say, planet, there would be a large opening in both. And why is it that we're forbidden from flying from, say, Japan over to Norway? I mean, why would you spend the time and the fuel to go all the way around the planet when you could cut your journey by literally 3x in terms of transit time? Everybody's squawking about CO2, yet you're still not allowed to fly across the North Pole. It still baffles me. You know, living in Asia, to go to Europe, which I did several times, I'm like, why do I need to fly around through Dubai first and then transit somewhere to Europe? Why do I need to go to Thailand and then go to Europe? Why can't I just go straight across over to Europe? Like from Japan to fly to Norway. Why would I need to go all the way back over through Los Angeles and then jump through New York and then finally fly over to Europe? Couldn't I just go across super fast from like Japan straight over there? What is it that we're not allowed to see in parts of our planet that are verboten for us to visually see? You know, squawking about CO2 is one thing, but then lengthening routes on airlines. Think about that for a second. If you knew the cycles and you were, I feel like I've been told by a few psychics and seers through visions, etc., that what we're going through now is just another rodeo. And we've been through this rodeo for 20 million years. So and I'll take your million years there and say that. So imagine if an advanced civilization had the wherewithal to understand the cycles and had some sort of, because look how good we are at tunnel building now. I mean, they can do these high-speed rails from New York over to Los Angeles in like an hour of all these tunnels we built underground. But perhaps that's only just really the sliver of the sliver on the top. What if there is something underneath? And we are living in a hollow cave, convex cave underneath where it is hollow. Think about that for a second, because when you look at things that are in space, when they do the droplets of water, they're hollow inside too. It takes the sheen of the outside surface tension, but on the internal area, it's hollow. And we start to look at bodies in space and the way stars with their plasma fields are rotating, glistening, jumping in color. It really makes you wonder, have we been used up to this point to get that last civilization to the overseers? And I'm not talking about my own epitome or understanding of an overseer, elite class, Jupiter ascending type of advanced civilization that has farmed us for so long. But think about it. What would the need be for that advanced civilization? There's got to be a couple products they would be targeting that need to be just centralized into a couple areas. So, you talked about rare earth minerals first. I mean, with this civilization that's in control now, that uses the human race as a worker race, that's expendable, understanding that nobody can ride through the cycle without help here. And whoever's not prepared or not in the countryside or not outside the control mechanism won't make it through. But again, if you got a worker race of people, you're not going to want everyone to die off. You're going to want a bunch to stay through and keep breeding and having other worker babies. So when they come out the backside in 15 or 20 years, when this cycle ends, there's an enormous amount of new people to repopulate the planet. It makes a lot of sense with these, what do they call them, orphan trains that were talked about during this last mud flood reset. So what is it about? Are the children saved? Are they the reset class? Is it those who are living in the countryside that can provide their own means and ends for food production with their children as the reset class that comes through this? All the city folk die. I mean, where do we go with this? Because what I'm looking at here in front of me, clear as I can see, daylight, this technology race that has been there, that I believe lives underground in a very controlled environment that has never been reset, anywhere from 1 to 20 million years old, uses, like I say, us here on this planet as a worker. What are their specific needs and target minerals, though? Gold, silver, rare earth minerals, perhaps. And if you want to take it to a few others, the vibration frequency through the fear for an extra dimensional entity to feed off of that. But what do you think in the world that they would take with them at the moment? Sure isn't going to be your house. Sure isn't going to be your loan on paper, because you can make new money out of digits. What are the physical goods that a civilization will want to extract from the planet after 2,000 years of sets and resets, sets and resets? It's weird how they have allowed this last 200 years to bring us to this point, because a lot of stories that I've read say that the Romans were incredibly close to using pressurized water to get us where we would have been in the steam revolution in 1750, way back in around the year 100. So why was that development stymied from using water pressure in the year 100 to bring us up to the steam era and say 150 era AD or even 200 AD, and allowing that mechanism to move forward from 200 AD to say 500 AD, and then we'd have airplanes flying around the place? Why did it get stymied again and again and again for the last 1,800 years before we're allowed to have airplanes now? Because that tech, going back to 1750, the 1750 tech was exactly the same as 100 AD tech. So why was there that such vast distance of stoppage of technology development? I don't have the answer, but I'm throwing the question out there. Maybe somebody does have the answer.
I don't know. It kind of seems to me like, the elite have kind of thrown out answers to those questions already. Like, we know that, we allege to know that, things like the Georgia Guidestones may indeed be a real threat to the population of the world. And what does it say? That you should reduce the world's population down to about 500 million, a manageable level, in perpetual balance with nature. So if you were going to take advantage, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, like how would they really accomplish a reset? Well, it seems like the easiest way is to let the zombies eat themselves. There's undoubtedly some soft kill programs out there meant to nudge you in that direction. You know, we got toxins in the food. There's addictions of many kinds that are totally legal that people have that kill them. You know, things like that are out there. But you know, if society collapses for whatever reason, and what better way to not be at fault of an authoritarian government is that nature did it. You know, nature did it. Oh, sorry, it was global warming. We told you, or you know, climate change, whatever they changed it to, whatever the title is. It's your fault. You did it, or nature did it. Whatever. It puts them out of the blame. But at the same time, you're right. They would have to. You know, why would they come out and hunt a bunch of people in the wilderness? That seems like not good resources if an impending doom event is coming. I'll tell you what they probably are going to do is they're just going to leave. They're going to let society eat itself and burn down. They've already given it the gasoline and the matches. They just need somebody to strike the match and start the fire. You've seen a lot of those fires started already. But think about it. They wouldn't have to. And why would they chase a bunch of people down in remote areas? After all, they do want a remaining population to come back to do whatever needs are necessary. Who are they going to tax when they come out of their bunkers? It makes sense. As a matter of fact, the evidence shows that empires fall and agrarian societies kind of are there for a little while, and then they turn back into empires because of farming. I mean, farming is not only, you know, will keep small populations alive, but if done right, and it can, you know, feed an empire. And we saw, like you were bringing up the Romans, it seems like there was a population limit, obviously, but there was an exact formula for this population. It seems that that's kind of evident with stuff like that. But not only that, you got, you know, billionaires that are giving out medications to people who are openly saying we need to reduce the population. And then also you have like held back technology, like you were pointing out. There was a little steam engine. I forgot who invented it. It's basically a steam engine. It was like a copper ball with two little opposite tubes on it. They would blow out steam when they would light a fire under it. Now, right there, all they had to do is put some kind of axle and a gear on it, and boom, industrial revolution, or all of those things anyway, would happen, right? Way back then, 3,600 years ago, or in the time of the Romans. I'm sure there's been millions of inventions that would have put society right on the cusp to getting to where we're at a lot sooner. But if that wasn't the timeline, if you needed to do everything in a specific way, like rake in resources, like you were talking about, maybe gold. And isn't it weird that the amounts of gold that have been accumulated by the world's empires, whether it be America, the British Empire, the Vatican, etc., China, whoever, those are all state secrets. How much gold does the Queen, one of those families we talked about earlier, the right to rule families, how much gold does she have? You will never know because it's a state secret. And they themselves are talking about kind of pretending to abdicate the throne and no longer have royalty, so they can slither back into you know, obscurity while things change and pop out again later with resources, massive amounts of resources, unimaginable amounts of resources. And like you said, they don't need money really. People always have said that. And you know, when I was young, I used to think that. You tell me, why do you go to war? Or why did they do this? Or why did they do that? And people would always say, oh, well, it's the money. It's the money. It's not the money. The people that run things print money. They make up the worth of the money. And then they make you strive for it, fight for it, die for it, be without it when they want, or be with it when they want you to do good. Whatever their purpose or agenda is, they've always controlled people in this fashion. And we're getting to this point that it seems like, just like before, an empire will fall, but yet there will be a small but yet present agrarian society continuing to do the work for the elites by keeping plants alive, keeping the earth healthy, and then they just roll back up, slither back into the garden, and take over again.
Yeah, I'm with you on the mind meld of that. Again, they're trying to paint a picture out here and bend the mind, because we as the human race create the reality on the planet. And if you would have 8 billion people think in a completely different direction, even it might be 1 second, but if all 8 billion people thought the same thing for 1 second, the literal fabric time space of this computer hologram would shift. So control the thought process going into the hologram, keep it fractured. And the hologram never changes with the glitch in the matrix here. This fractured computer program that's a malware that's running on this side. The dark entities putting this programming for the human race to create the reality that's conducive for them, not conducive for us. So imagine if it swung the other direction, where perhaps when this war and the prophecies and the signs in the heavens, maybe that's the pendulum swing. Or it doesn't matter how much programming is on the TV, how many extra medicines are given, how much propaganda there is, narrative, talk, whatever. When people truly see a blue star Kachina coming through in 2022, planets with loops of plasma jumping between each other, rings becoming another entity in the sky, perhaps people will start to think differently, and it's that manifestation of the signs in the skies that actually trigger the human race to use their resonant thought capability to change the frequency and reset it, versus being reset through thought and programming of the media. The base, whatever it is, because everybody innately has this base sixth sense, this base of humanity inside them. The seed of God exists within all of us. And it's such a limiting term, you know, oneness, the creator, the great architect, whatever you like to call it. This consciousness that pervades all time, space, dimensionality, infinity. The creation from the base level of vibration and consciousness that holds everything else together, from the atomic to the molecular to the solids and everything else in between, and makes it rotate and move in perfect perfection, where life is the baseline. That would be the default where we would move back to when the signs in the skies come. And that would be way more powerful than any programming that goes on now. So maybe that is the default when the signs in the skies come, and it is so terrifying when canyon wall petroglyphs come to life in front and people can't deal with it, they don't understand it, that every programming mechanism disappears for a second. And all humanity unites under this reversion back to source. And that's what puts the gin back in the bottle. Maybe it's on the cycle. Then we get another 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 years of reprieve from this darkness, because that's the direction we went. But the underground controllers know that the vibration above on the planet's too intense for them to come back up. I don't know, it's a little bit deep concept to think about, but what we're about to see in the skies is going to shake people's reality to the core of what is real or not real. And when they see petroglyphs dancing in the skies, like Ransom, you've seen an enormous amount more real petroglyphs on canyon walls than I've ever seen in my life, even through photos. Like you've seen tens, dozens, hundreds of times more than I've ever seen in my whole life, even perusing the photos. Because I know that's what you seek. You look for those. You go out with Diamond and those. You run around, Ken. You're invited to, private land of Native Americans to go look at these places we could never dream of going, off limits for almost everybody on the planet, except you're all invited in to go check out, because you understand the legends that were talked about are exactly what they put on those canyon walls, and they accepted you because you understand their legends were true. And you gave it credence and you gave it solidity, and you understood and you were explaining through science what that meant on that canyon wall. That's why they love you, and that's why they bring you in and let you go on private lands. Like when that appears back in the skies, people are going to lose their minds. They're not going to understand what centipedes are cruising across the sky. They're not going to understand Squatter Man. They're not going to understand a lot of these things. Ladders to the heavens, Jacob's ladder. You know, that's another plasma display. That was explained in the Bible. A plasma display of a Jacob's ladder taking form to the heavens is written in the Bible. Like a lot of these things are starting to swing back again. And when we look at these legends and the myths, and there's so much coming back. So, I mean, there's only so much that these narratives and the current world can hold in terms of control before people lose it and it reverts back to base source, because nobody's an atheist in a foxhole. I guess I'll leave it there.
Well, you know, we get woo-woo sometimes, so I thought I might spin a web of like a short sci-fi movie, right? It may or may not, you know, be real in some universe somewhere. But what if these people, whoever they are, or maybe they're not even people, but whatever, some force made a technological revelation and built a grid over a planet. And in that grid, they put all kinds of electromagnetic devices. And then they got people to voluntarily take electromagnetic materials and then admitted to the world that, you know, you were talking about what kind of programming's out there, and, you know, people are going to see these things and whatever. But what if I told you in this sci-fi movie that no one would see it? Only completely awake people who didn't get manipulated will see it. And so in this universe, right, we got things like this, and I'll show you. I sent you this earlier. So people talk about, what if, you know, you needed to get little magnets or electromagnetic things into other things? Well, here's these nice little, you know, admissions from technology, and I've showed my channel lots of them about nanotech, all kinds of little things that can reprogram and do things that you would only think are on movies, are all in reality right now, somewhere in a lab. But this one right here, scientists create the world's thinnest magnet at just 1 atom thick. Now, you know that with magnetics and electromagnetics, you can make some really cool things. So maybe like if something was happening in this universe that you might see or notice, or it might bother you about your reality unfolding not the way you wanted it to or the way you believed it was, what if they just had a machine that they could turn on that had an AI that could connect to this electromagnetic network and affect you while you sleep? And while you sleep, they can give you ideas. Maybe they could even control when you go to sleep and when you wake up, as this article says right here. Next generation AI could control when humans sleep and wake up with groundbreaking tech. Now, let's add on to that other ideas like alien abductions and manipulations. People, you know, have a lot of beliefs out there, but you know, they may be real and they may not be real, but it doesn't matter. If you have the technology to make people believe anything you want, subconsciously, culturally, through the media, through alpha, like not alpha waves exactly, but you know, light flicker rates through screens and other things. These are all things that are real. There are things that can type out your thoughts. There are things that can show images your mind. These are not sci-fis, but in this fictional world, what if, you know, they used all of these technologies in conjunction, and maybe there was something up in the sky that you weren't meant to see? You know, would it help to have a giant web of satellites beaming down to the ground to the other electromagnetic grid that goes into every single home just about in the world, and can be broadcast on every single device that most people in the world keep in their pocket and keep with them at all times? Kind of like a little personal droid that tells them when and where to go, what to do and what to like and what to wear and what to take and what to eat. And evidently, you could just manipulate this algorithm and make people go to sleep, wake up, believe anything you want them to believe with just a little bit of simple existing technology, existing at least in our reality and our universe. Now, I'm not saying that this is being done, because if I did, people would be angry and say I was a conspiracy theorist for connecting dots that maybe other people might not connect.
Or a conspiracy researcher. And a conspiracy is only two people agreeing on an idea to keep it a secret from others. Only two to keep it a secret from others. So when you look at higher realms where there's thousands of people working together, and you know, please, anybody listening out there tonight, we're not talking about global government with a T on the end. It's more of a system of global governance, where it seems that you're right, Ransom. There's a top-down approach where every single nation is following in conjunction. You'd think there would be some opponents out there, right? You think there'd be a few, because all through human history that we've known it, anybody who's alive at this point that's like, say, 100 years old or younger, there's always been opposition to every single idea that's ever been out there since we've been alive. There's always, you know, at least 20, 30, 40 countries or 10, 20, whatever, that'll always say, no, that's the opposite. And they're always infighting about this, that, and the other. There's never been a time where every country has followed lockstep with every other country on the planet. So you know something gigantic is on the horizon when this happens. If that wasn't the giant, you know, firework in the sky to say, whoa, every single country is doing the exact same thing in a global governance structure here, where some, you know, super giant top-down Bigaloo came out of the woodwork and said, we're all going to do this. You all need to do this. And they said, oh, okay, everybody's going to do it. It's not that America is following a global government, because nobody would accept that. But it's like somewhere above, the orders are being given, so every leader of each nation then carries out that order. Because it's not because then it's just like, well, we want to do it because, and then there's nowhere to point to. So it just makes you wonder, as we come into the winter here, two things, or actually three things. What types of signs we're going to see in the sky in terms of electro anomalies. Secondly, the food pricing that's coming in, where most people's food is going to double in price and the availability won't be there. And like you say, you know, all these stories about Taco Bell and Chipotle and all these things where a lot of people who didn't cook before, they relied on that just to go out and get McDonald's or get Taco Bell or something. That food, that supply chain's gone. Where are they going to go to? Well, hopefully they learn to grow their own food and start cooking at home. And then the economy getting in shatters at the moment, and even people who got into crypto are getting crushed at the moment. So it seems like a top-down approach to crush everything, including anything DeFi, where people thought, oh, I'll just make a return on every. Oh, they lost because they got stopped out. And then you look at the prices of food, the availability of food, everything moving forward is now you need an actual piece of paper to go in the place to go buy food. So where does that leave the world? I mean, there's definitely something nefarious going on where you need a paper to go into a place to buy food. And I am absolutely sure rationing's coming. By the end of the year, I will say it again, there will be rationing. We already saw it during the first steps in here. Buy 2 of this, you can only buy 1 of that. But this is far beyond that. You will get a permission code to go in to buy a certain amount of kilograms of meat per month or per week. Certain amount of kilograms. I would say it would be meat and eggs in the beginning, but other dairy. But other things will follow after that. Because 2022, when we see that blue star come in, oh my, there's going to be an enormous amount of people freaking when the blue star comes. That'll be at the end of the year. Probably around the solstice of December of 2022, you're going to see a blue comet come through that'll take up about an 8. It'll be the size of the full moon during the day. And so many Hopi legends follow this. How will governments react? How much food can you grow? And what are you doing today to get yourself more self-sufficient off the supply chain? Thanks for listening. David Dubine signing off right along with Branson Godwin. 420 TV Freedom is Films, 1776, broadcasting live on YouTube. Check out the videos and images right now we've been talking about. Until next week.
Radio.
Peace.
What the heck is the truth, Jihad? Hey, I'm Kevin Barry.